save the childhood memories for later in the panel. My name's Josh Jaffe. I'm the general manager of Horoscope.com, Inc. We operate 4 properties headlined by Horoscope.com and Astrology.com. And aside from that, we have meaningful social distribution, and we're one of the biggest publishing senders of email to people that have signed up for their daily horoscopes.
Hi, I'm Amy Royster. I'm Managing Director of Agency Strategy for Cox Media Group. Relevant fact, my background, half of my career with Cox was in journalism, so storytelling, and I think from what we just heard from the last panelist, last speaker, completely agree that the content and the form are really important, right? And so storytelling done powerfully in native formats, I think is what incites people to take action and is really compelling. So I love this topic because it marries the first half of the journalism side with the revenue side. So excited to be here with you today.
My name is Lee Zellweger, and I am the publisher of Reader's Digest, both the print and the digital product. And we are also a legacy print product, obviously, which is just one of the many things we have in common with Cooper Hefner. But no good childhood stories.
All right, and while others are still getting their coffee, just to get a sense of the room, how many of you here are on the publisher side of the world? All right, now of you, how many of you have your own internal studio, department, team, et cetera, to create content like what BuzzFeed was showing, et cetera? All right, so I want to start the conversation in that territory, and we're gonna go a little from there. If you guys could each just take a couple minutes, describe, and I know you each have different roles in this, how that works within your orgs for a second, and what you particularly do with the creation of the content balanced with edit, et cetera. Amy, or Lee, you want to kick us off?
I'll start. We have a fairly new dedicated team called the Reader's Digest Content Studio. They are 100% editorial. They're the same people who write articles for the website and for the magazine. And that, as I say, is relatively new for us as native grows for us on the Reader's Digest side. We are part of a company called Trusted Media Brands. We also do Taste of Home and The Family Handyman. So we have native is, certainly for recipe sites, native is a really important part with recipe integration and things like that in video. So we have a lot of history with it, and we are kind of building it on the RD side.
So for us, at Cox Media Group, we have native teams at properties like the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So a native content lead, a native buyer who's pacing drivers to pace traffic to native content on the site, native video lead, and a native sales lead. So that's what it looks like on the media side. And then Cox also owns a media agnostic full-service advertising agency that I oversee called IdeaBar. And one of the many things that we do is create native content for clients on the agency side that we're pushing out to the right publisher or working with the right publisher on. So most of what I think is probably relevant for this conversation is what Cox is doing at the local properties with those native teams.
Yeah, and at Horoscope.com, I think we take a kind of different approach than many publishers. We're not an article-driven brand. We're about horoscopes and astrological information. So the way we integrate native advertising is in through text links. It's in through sponsored channels for different marketers. It's in through XML feeds of people that you might want to talk to about something something related to love, about relationships, about your health, about money, something that a horoscope might spur you to think about, and so that's kind of we try to get the user down specific funnels around topics and then serve them up some sort of message that is in the style of the site and highly relevant to them.
So thanks. So one of the and by the way, for CBS Interactive, we have something called Studio 61, which is an independent team that does all the content production, kept separate from our edit staff. So one of the, I don't know about the word conundrum, but challenges can be how do we balance, and you think again about the BuzzFeed presentation, the original content, the brands who want things, the relationships with the customers, and editorial and their own missions. So if Honda wants to come to you and says, the Honda Civic is a great budget vehicle, can you just have everybody who has Pisces say, today you should save money, buy a Honda? How would that work? You know, where are the limitations between what Edit wants to do, and I know you guys have a different editorial structure, and what an advertiser might want to do, and how do you guys mitigate that, work together, and you can mess around with that story a little bit if you need to.
On the print side, certainly there's a very well-maintained church and state separation. On the digital side, as I mentioned, our native people are actually editors for the most part. And so it's very different on that side. And so as a guy who's been doing this a long time, I think it's actually surprising to the extent that we are willing to kind of talk about specific brands even. We recently did a campaign for Ford, and it says Ford in the headline, actually, of the native pieces. We do a lot of measurement, and those particular things increased purchase intent by about 28%, which I thought was kind of interesting, because I do think it was a little bit, even a little bit different than most native in terms of trying to keep it consistent with editorial, because it did say Ford in the headline.
So for me, you know, I mentioned earlier that I started as a journalist. So certainly I understand the value of pure journalism and church and state. But I feel very strongly, and perhaps because I've migrated a long time ago over to revenue, but I feel very strongly that that at least for us, revenue owning strategy and the client conversation, and then working in whatever way is right, you know, with editorial. So for us, what that looks like, and I'll use the Atlanta Journal-Constitution as an example. The positions that were formerly in editorial have migrated over and are reporting into revenue. And because one of the things that we are trying to continue to get better and better at is starting these conversations off with a business conversation, so we really understand what are the KPIs that matter to them that they're trying to achieve with the content. So as soon as that starts to sound very businessy and sciencey, we balance that with the need to tell a really compelling story. So again, back to what the speaker said earlier, you know, that sort of the magic in the story and the function, right? But for us, having that team, and I'm sure it works different ways in different organizations, but for us, having that team reporting up to revenue and then dedicating a sales lead who understands how to have those initial conversations with clients and brands, having a content lead, having editorial quality journalists and storytellers over on the revenue side, a video lead, and then the buyer who's helping. So for us, we want this native content in the example of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution to stay on our site, right? So it's about increasing even engagement on our site. So those teams for us, being part of revenue has just been important. But that said, we work really closely with editorial to make sure that we have teaser spots that are not just off on the side, but they're actually formerly editorial spots that we dedicate so that they know not to put breaking news on that spot. And we'll keep evergreen content there if we don't have something sold, but we're making sure that you know, that we are able to have that relationship so that we can move really quickly, and we're not having to sit down and have this sort of back and forth conversations with them on the fly when we have an opportunity for a client. So, some thoughts.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we haven't had anyone approach us targeting specific zodiac signs, not yet, but we have had a brand, a Live Advice marketplace in Europe approach us earlier this year about help breaking into the French market. They had some French advisors, they wanted to reach customers, and so what we did was we basically mimicked, we had our product team effectively copy horoscope.com, the layout. So some of the horoscopes, some of the tarot readings, some of the games, some of the reference articles, and then we have the editorial team manage the translation process with folks in Paris. And it was great because we were able to, it was very valuable for the marketer, and it was a good return, very good return for us.
Cool. So coming out to you guys for a sec, it sounds like we've all found different types of harmony. Editorial versus, I'm meaning that lightly, editorial versus native promoted content. Is it an obstacle or is it just a challenge? You know what I mean? Like, obstacle would be we don't know how to get past this. Challenge would be you got to figure it out each time. So obstacle, challenge. All right, we're going to move on then. People didn't know the question I just asked? Sorry, all right, a lot of email. Okay, we're going to switch around it completely. Data. How do you guys approach measuring impact of these campaigns, especially because everybody wants data. There's tons of it at our disposal. So I think it'd be a lot easier in the world of TV advertising when you talk about data because there's so much less of it. But our worlds are inundated with it. What do you measure the most? What's always top of mind when you're either creating a campaign or executing on it, et cetera?
I wish I had a much more interesting answer for you, but we believe in research, especially for native campaigns. We do want to make sure that we show effectiveness, so we work with Vizu and the Nielsen Media Lab and things like that. And if our clients aren't doing it, we try to do it ourselves to measure effectiveness. And data comes more for us, honestly, on knowing what kind of content works for our audience. We do a lot of data internally for our own editorial, and that is, of course, reflected in the native that we do as well.
So for us, back to the example of, take the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, that sales lead is having a conversation with a client up front about what they're really trying to achieve and setting some KPIs. And then the buyer that is so we will send traffic to that content through O&O spots that we're not monetizing otherwise programmatically, through reach extension, Facebook, Nativo, et cetera. And that buyer is pacing the traffic over the life of that native to achieve certain KPIs. And they've got it, we don't guarantee unique visitors or engagement, but we give guidance on what they can expect and have done enough of it to really hit it pretty closely. So we're reporting back then on unique visitors. We're reporting back on engagement. Did they take a quiz? Did they, what did they do after they read that story with some of the other features that are on that page? How did they engage? Did they watch a video? How long, et cetera? And giving that back to them and having conversations. And then it's typically not a one-off for us. It would be part of a larger campaign that they're doing. So we're seeing how that's integrating and working together.
Yeah, and again, at horoscope.com, it's kind of an unusual situation where we're owned actually by one of our biggest advertisers. So our owner is a company called Ingenio, and they own and operate a live advice platform called Keen.com. And so we integrate native placements for them, and we have the benefit of being able to see exactly how what the impact is of every single placement, because we have full transparency into their data. So for us, we look at this and we'll look at it all the way down the funnel. Again, this is not brand awareness. We are being fully incentivized based on new customers, new paying customers to mainly the live advice platforms or dating sites. And so we look at impressions, we look at clicks, we look at registrations, we look at conversions, and because our owner is one of our big advertisers, we can even look at long-term value of the customer based on specific placements and optimize based on that.
Cool. So one of the other comments I liked about, by the way, if the gentleman who did the BuzzFeed presentations in the room, really well done. One of the comments that was made was about how the form and function have to go together. I don't know about you guys, and I'm not going to single out any site at all, but it seems like there's a decent amount of native ads that are really just a random banner ad that might have some cooking or some targeting showing up in a feed, right? And not quite the same as the couple having toothbrushes together. What do you think? Is there any challenge here? Do we need to clamp down on that? Should we have some standards around that? What are your opinions on the faux native advertising?
Speaking just for Reader's Digest, obviously, we're kind of talking about custom native here for the most part, but we do all kinds of things, like probably everybody else does. We work with Nativo. We have touts going to different places. We have articles on the Right Rail, which are not Reader's Digest articles necessarily. I think consumers, kind of know the difference, and that they generate revenue for us. We like those things. Is there a danger ultimately that we lose credibility with our customers and/or brands for things like that, or brands lose credibility? I think there is, but we live in a world where we're kind of doing it all on.
I think there are a lot of things that we wouldn't describe as native to our clients on the media side, or certainly to our clients on the agency side. But that kind of debate, I feel like for us, it's really more about I feel like there's an element of storytelling when native is at its most compelling, or perhaps, in my opinion, perhaps its highest form. And that doesn't mean don't do other things. Do what works, right? Try lots of things, do what works. But when there's that element of storytelling, I think what you saw in the example with the toothbrushes clearly was a narrative arc of a story over their lifetime, and that was longer form. You can still create that emotion in a story even in 6 seconds on Snap. So to me, it's when we're eliciting an emotion that is right for the brand, and where there's this element that we've told a story. Because I think that when native works best, it's about discovery of a product or service in a format that does not feel like perhaps an ad format they've seen before and are defensive about or ready to tune out.
By the way, did anyone else think that was an ad for toothbrushes? No one? I was sure the whole time. I'm like, what's the hook here? That was the consistent. Anyway. Josh, any comments on that one? All right. So going down that path a little further, since Amy, you opened the door for you try a lot of things. Tell us about something you might have tried that didn't go as planned. Let's help the group learn from our failures. Right. They don't have to be colossal failures.
Yeah. Okay. I'll start.
I live in denial. I don't have failures.
I think years ago, when we were coming at native from print and sort of slapping something online, we've come up clearly a long way, and I know all of you have too since then, but clearly that didn't really work. Or when we weren't having a serious business conversations about what the expectations could be around a native campaign, I think that was less effective. But practically speaking, when we were trying to publish native, so for our media properties, so I just keep using the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, but when we were trying to publish native on our own CMS, it was inefficient and difficult to target, and we really didn't pick up speed until we used the ad tech Nativo to help us do that.
Yeah, I can talk about failures and learnings. Rest of the panel. One that comes to mind is. Earlier this year, one of our marketing partners, they wanted to complement some of the native placements with banner advertising. So they were buying 10–20% of our display inventory to really complement and kind of maximize the impact of the native advertising. And we expected performance to improve. But actually, it was strange, but it didn't improve. When we pulled the banner advertising in spring, and we just focused on native and actually made sure we basically have one native placement per page across at least horoscope.com and soon astrology.com, the performance, the conversions, and all the metrics went up very meaningfully. So it was not it was not at all what we expected would happen, but yeah, so.
All right. Do I have any brave soul in the audience who wants to share a little failure story, share with the group? We can all learn from something of yours. Anybody out there?
Native failure.
I'll let you think about it. We'll come back in a couple of minutes. Lee, do you have anything you want to add on this?
Just us. We're the only.
Yeah, we're the only failure. Yeah. All right. What do you think about the challenges with scaling all this? I mean, you guys each represent huge brands, huge outlets, and the more stories like the BuzzFeed one get out there, the more brands are going to want this and more of it. And we also know everybody wants personalization. ... How does this all grow successfully?
Well, that's clearly a challenge, as once we do our, once we do a great custom native article, we do then need to generate impressions against it. And so social becomes a big part of it, and traffic drivers on the site become a big part of it. And that is, really the challenge. So.
I mean, I think when we think about scaling for an individual client, then we'd prefer to be doing an annual campaign of native for them, where we're looking at sort of the life cycle of relevancy in their consumer journey and planning things out rather than a one-off. But when we think about scaling, I think this is a huge challenge, for all of us. And so we think of layers, if you will. So there's very customized native content that we are producing for brands that we're working with the publisher that's right to do on the agency side. And then there's sort of a middle layer, and what we'd really like to continue to explore is something that is a little more off the shelf, a little more sort of grab and go, and we have not been able to kind of fully crack that. So I think that that's a really relevant challenge, and if anyone in the room has thoughts on that, we'd love to hear. But we think that there's a place to say for certain people when they're higher in the funnel with brand and they're trying to accomplish certain things and they have different budgets, then there's something really fully customizable that we're doing, something in the middle, and then but we'd like to keep working on something for. Especially our hyper-local media properties for a medium-sized business, something that they could participate in, that we weren't reinventing the wheel over and over and over again.
Yeah, and for us, I mean, one of the ways I think about scaling is just breaking it down by kind of the means of distribution. So, we get most of our traffic from search and from organic. And I think that on our actual sites, we have scaled native to the right balance. However, we also have distribution in email, and so we're still working on getting that right, putting native links in the right spot, and basically integrating brand messages in a way that is resonant with readers, but also impactful for the advertisers. But I think we're well on our way with that. I think the bigger challenge is on the platforms, and it's one thing to do brand awareness, and that's great. And I think we've seen BuzzFeed and others be very successful with that. But for us, again, we're not about brand awareness. We're about DR. We have to deliver a conversion, a customer, and so that's kind of the next step. How do you drive that kind of result? And I'm not sure. We figured out certainly how to do it straight out of the platform, like on Facebook into conversion. Right now, it's kind of like a two-step. It's you get them on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, whatever, and then push them off to our site where we can get them. And I'd like to be able to do it in the one step, straight from the platform. But that would be scale.
Over the past couple of months, we've seen both Snapchat and Instagram incorporate more ways to link out to products, et cetera. When you look ahead over the next 6 months, year and a half even, what do you predict is going to be the next phase of native and social and O&O as far as all this goes? Are they going to be pushing Do we think we'll see a slew of we want native experiences on Snapchat, we don't care about your website anymore? What do you think's coming down the imminent pike, as it were? That was a last minute curveball.
No, that's okay. So Snap. I mean, I think that is something that we're just playing around the edges with. And I think that there are challenges for native, and how do you do things in a 6-second format, right? We're doing really fun things with our creative teams, just little exercises where we're pulling them in and tell me a story in 6 seconds about this. This water carafe. Go. Tell me a story in 6 seconds about. So I think that preparing to be able to use that form in new ways is important, and we'll continue to watch it as it evolves. That's just kind of one thought off the top of my head.
I mean, I think it's like a back and forth between publishers and the platforms, and it depends on kind of how much leverage that platform thinks it has over publishers at that moment. And the more, I think, the more leverage they think they perceive themselves to have, the less, the more difficult it is to move people off the platforms onto your own properties where you can monetize them more effectively. And if they don't feel like they have as much leverage and they feel like they need more content, then they're going to be more generous. But it goes back and forth. It's never, it's not static. And I think we've seen that.
I'm also thinking just about Facebook Live and some things that we've been trying to do with Facebook Live, where we'll have a newsroom personality that will hire a moderator to keep the newsroom personality pure, and the moderator is delivering the brought to you by message, interviewing the newsroom personality about a topic. Is that native? Is it sponsorship? As that format continues to evolve, I think we'll see more and more. But we're having a lot of fun playing in that space.
Audience, I'll come to you. Anyone have a pithy remark on how native advertising on new social platforms is the next big thing, here to stay, flash in the pan? Anybody want to opine for 30 seconds to a minute on that? Nobody? All right.
I think we feel like it's here to stay, yes? Or no? Yeah.
Steve, how much? I know we're off schedule a little bit. How much time do we actually have?
We should go to Q&A in a minute.
Okay.
But why don't you wrap?
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap with our lightning round.
Go ahead.
If that's okay. All right. Ready?
I don't think I was briefed on
You were
this.
not briefed. There was no briefing done. Best metric in advertising. Quick answer. Just anything. We're not going to hold you to it.
Conversions.
Conversion.
Conversion.
Worst metric in advertising.
Likes.
Impressions.
I'll go with likes. Yeah.
Most overused term in advertising.
Data.
Most overused term. He said data.
I said data.
Well, I got to go with pivot after this morning and all the.
Okay. Lightningly, give us an answer.
Native.
Native. Okay. All right. Your daily mandatory professional read.
Media post.
Steve, give.
I read so much. New York Times, and not media, not industry specific. Really trying to pull out of that and make sure I understand kind of a wider view.
If I had a buzzer, I would have buzzed that answer. I'm just saying.
Okay, so I would say, aside from the obvious industry pubs, I actually go to the Outline now a lot. I get inspired, just ideas around UX and design. I think they're doing some interesting stuff.
All right. The coolest startup you know, whether or not related to the industry. Or app that no one's heard of. Come on, give us something that you know that others don't.
My Idol, obsessed. If you guys haven't done this, please. In fact, tonight at the after party. So you take a picture and it's like an animated. It's you, but like animated, and you can make it do all sorts of things. My Idol, it's amazing, super fun.
All right.
Chef's Feed.
Headspace. It's been around for a
Good
while.
one.
Yeah.
Okay. Non-competitive to you publisher that you admire the most.
I said one that I admire. The Outline.
The Outline.
Because we're talking about native, I think the New York Times does an unbelievable job with that. And if you haven't Googled New York Times and Orange is the New Black, it is definitely worth your time to do that. It was touching and warm, but it was really news, and it was very much keeping with the New York Times personality. And then it was also about about a show about women in prison, and it was just brilliantly done. So,
All right.
The daily candy and things like that, that I think sometimes we dismiss. I'm Gen X, that's not quite my generation, but listening to that tone of voice, I think is important to helping us stay relevant.
Mine's Thrillist. I love it every day. Last one, best show to binge on Netflix. Come on.
We could
This
do
is a
separate panel on
softball
this.
question.
I'll say the OA.
All right.
Narcos.
All right.
Same.
Peaky Blinders.
Yeah.
Okay. Audience Q&A.
Let's get some questions. I'm a journalist. I know damn well you're bullshitting me if you don't have questions about native. Oh.
We can hear you.
Here.
I'll repeat the question.
Here.
Hey guys, it's Marcus Whitty from Source Media. With the increase and obviously in mobile traffic coming in through sites, what are you guys doing around mobile? Because a lot of what we're looking at is how do you sort of natively deliver into the mobile experience around text messaging and things like that. Are you guys experimenting with that? Do you think there's any legs there?
We like mobile because, or native for mobile, because it deals with a lot of the kind of interesting, tough issues on delivering ads that are relevant on mobile. They're not as annoying. They're not moving all over the page with you. It's just so we like native, and that's about probably 60% of our page views are on mobile.
I think for us sometimes, depending on who the client is and their business, thinking about not just designing something and assuming that it's going to be responsive, but really thinking about that format and thinking about how we can create an experience and tell a story that's right for understanding how many people are going to come to it through mobile.
Yeah, for us, about 75% of page views are on the phone. So we have responsive sites. The native integrations we have on desktop are, live on mobile. And in fact, it's a good thing because these live advice platforms, we can drive so many new customers to them. When you're on your phone and you see a text link that is suggesting maybe you want to talk to someone about the horoscope you just read, then you just click and you go right into a call. You can call straight there, and that's incredibly valuable and lucrative for us. So that's on the site. In apps, we're re-releasing one of our apps later this year, and we're thinking about notifications and how do you, for people that are into astrology, things are always changing, and there's times of the day when it's good to have a conversation with your partner, and there's times of the day when it's not, and you want to avoid confrontation, for example. So how do you take that information and what you know about the individual to give them a valuable marketing message, maybe whatever it might be. Those are some of the things we're thinking about.
We're playing around a little bit with a pay for performance in the native space, right? So in that instance, I think mobile is interesting as we're bringing people into a story and into content, and then having them engage with a page, and then seeing a form fill off to the side, being able to follow up and text them, especially in that pay for performance model where it is more than us just saying here are some guidelines on the KPIs for what you can expect for unique visitors and for engagement. We're pushing further down toward conversion, and I think mobile has a huge place in that.
I'll answer it, by the way, as a publisher. We found that since we've upped our use of notifications, the consumer interest is skyrocketing, even actually desktop notifications, to the point where now we are being asked, what do we do with native in push and things like that? And we're still figuring it out, to be honest. We're at that. We're going to try a few things, see what works, see what doesn't, see what our consumers like, see what our advertisers like, the whole deal. More questions?
No, we'll save it for the roundtable.
All right.
Jeremy, panel, thanks very much.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.